Hey, my name's ShawNshawN. I do art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today we're going to review Rocketman. So Rocketman is the story of Elton John from childhood through a little bit of his teen years, but mostly the childhood all the way into his young superstardom, and finally kind of ends where he faces his addiction problems in AA. So I think that's a good evolution of the story as far as what you can do with Elton John. I mean, he's still alive, so it's a little bit different than the Freddie Mercury story where he gets AIDS and dies, and so that's much more of a strong tragedy. I mean, no one wishes a songwriter to die, but the longer you live, the less, I don't know, there's something about a tragic biography that people like The Doors, you know, the Freddie Mercury movie. I mean, it just kind of grabs you more because it's kind of like this bitter end, like, oh, what if, you know, or Kurt Cobain, you're like, what if Nirvana, you know, I mean, they could have definitely done like 3 or 4 more good albums. So you don't have that when a singer, you know, lives a full life, basically. And Elton John has lived a full life with a lot of crazy drugs and all kind of stuff, so. So so that's basically the film. What's interesting is I didn't really know, like with Elton John going into this, I knew some of his songs, obviously. I grew up 70s, 80s, young kid, so I heard a lot of his songs on the radios. I didn't really collect his music, but I knew all these songs that they were singing. And I had sung some of them in restaurant bars. So it was really interesting to have this side of Bernie Taupin, who's also the writer. And he was kind of this co-writer with Elton John. And in the movie, they kind of show him as he's being the writer and Elton John is the pianoist singer. In reality, they both were kind of songwriters, although Taupin writes a lot of songs for Elton John. And actually, Taupin actually wrote for other bands like Alice Cooper and Willie Nelson, and he also was a visual artist, but they kind of boiled it down to he's just a songwriter for the movie's sake, right? So they simplify his character. I would have been a little bit nice to know that he was a visual artist too. I think they could have put a little bit of elements in it. It would have been kind of really interesting. Obviously, Elton John would have overshined him as far as the outrageousness of the costume. So maybe that's why they cut that from the film. Also, they're just focusing on Elton John, of course. There were some really cool elements, I think, as far as, I'm not sure if they're true, but they have this part where he goes to school when he's a young boy, and he kind of gets this scholarship to go to this really prestigious school. So he goes there and she's like, oh, where's your music? Did you bring a piece for me to play? He's like, I didn't bring any music to you. We were supposed to bring something. And she had been playing something, and then she's like, all right, come up and see what you can do. You know, she's like, oh, we're gonna kick this kid out, right? So he comes up and he literally plays exactly what she had played. So that's a really cool element, that he had like such a great ear that he could just instantly transform it into music. So he had such a really good, it shows how you really have such a good understanding of the musical instrument to be able to replicate someone right on the spot. I don't know if this is per se his talent, but it kind of symbolically shows how talented Elton was with the piano. It was interesting too, I think they did a good job of developing the mother and father, because obviously growing up being gay, but then you don't know you're gay, and then later you're kind of, you think you're bisexual, and then later you transition to finally being openly gay as a singer. So he's gone through a huge evolution, and also he went through the 70s, 80s were very anti-gay, I would say. You could definitely become a musician, but you kind of had to pretend that you kind of had to put a face to the public that you were straight, right? And so you see this also with Freddie Mercury, kind of played like he was straight. He actually had a girlfriend and then finally dumped her. Elton John in this film, he actually has a girlfriend, he has to dump her. And it has kind of this interesting thing. It wasn't probably till Boy George where it's really like openly gay, right? So, and that was in the 80s. So you kind of see that nice transition, and you could also see that within Queen's interpretation of Freddie Mercury versus Rocketman. Rocketman, I mean, it's mostly focused on Elton John, so it's Elton John and the singer-songwriter, right? So there's not much of, and the other Queen side, they actually have the band members are still alive, and so they kind of show like a cleaned up PG-13 version of Freddie Mercury. They don't show much of the gay sex, they don't show much of the drugs. You get the feeling that he had all that, but they really kind of strip that clean, which is okay. I mean, it's a nice way to show it to young kids that might not be, where the parents might not be comfortable with showing them the gay lifestyle. Well, it's not really a lifestyle, it's just they're gay, right? But you know, it's a good way for parents to show their kids something where it's like a superstar that might have been drugs, but just in a lighter way that you can explain to kids without saying, hey, you should have a lot of drugs, right? So this film kind of strips that out, and it's a little bit more raw. So it has some of the cocaine usage, it has some of the gay sex scenes, but you know, stripped down, obviously it's gonna pass. It's not like a porno or anything, right? So it's just, you get the feeling that he has, you know, sex with guys. So I thought that was really good. It gets really to the crux of yeah, the taboo around gay sex at this time frame, as well as kind of, you know, like he has this partner who ends up being his business manager and then he's kind of screwed him over. You know, he's just out for the money, and it kind of shows that real tension between that as a couple is really interesting, as well as when he's rich and he's got all these rights to Elton John's music. He's just like, yeah, whatever, you know, get a blowjob while I'm at Elton John's house. It's pretty hilarious scene in a way. I'm sure people that are from the middle of the country are gonna be like, oh God, you know, like they're gonna, you know, freak out. But I mean, that's really essential because it kind of gets, it's nice in the fact that you can see different ways of being gay. So it's interesting because Elton John's obviously a singer, so he's then flamboyant with the costumes. But you have this singer, this manager who's actually kind of wears all three-piece suit, and he's like a proper businessman, really good-looking guy and all this, but a total, you know, kind of jerk kind of guy, heartless. But you know, Elton John didn't know. I mean, he was young and fell for this guy. The other thing they do with this film, they shoot a lot of scenes as a musical. So with the Queen's movie, it's actually like a biography, and then they start creating music and it's the music, but then it's a biography and then it's the music. So you have this, in the Queen's movie, it's more of a storyline, and then they have some concert scenes, right? So that kind of how you traditionally put a biography together. This one's interesting in the aspect that they taking like scenes from his childhood and then he's singing and you're like, he wasn't singing as a child, you know, but it shows you another way to show Elton John's music, but at the same time refer to these songs meant this to him in his childhood. You know, this is from this scene. One of the things that they had a line about a vodka and tonic, which I always knew that line in this one particular song. It's escaping me where it comes from, but he starts the song off with talking about a vodka and tonic won't cure your blues, and then he goes and shoots in the song. And then when I heard it, I was just like, all right, the guy likes to drink a vodka and tonic, whatever. You know, I didn't think anything of it as a teenager because I think because in the 90s and the 2000s when I got older, the music got much darker. You know, you got like Eminem coming out, misogynist kind of music, all this stuff, and then you have rap music, and that was some hardcore shit. And so this lighter version from the 70s, 80s, where it's just they're dancing on the topics, you know, you don't read as deep into them. Like if you had been in the 60s growing up, you would have been like, oh my God, this is crazy what Elton John's doing. You know what I mean? So it's just your reference point of when you grew up for how the lyrics hit you. So it's interesting that they explain that the vodka and tonic is actually referring to him drinking like vodka and orange juice, vodka in the morning, you know, to get up and go. So he was like a really raging alcoholic in a way. So yeah, I really like that. Yeah, and I like what they did with the gay sex because it makes people a little uncomfortable, especially like I saw it in Richmond, Indiana, which is like, they don't have any openly gay people. I mean, they have gay people there, but it's like I can spot them nowadays because I live in San Francisco, and so I see, oh yeah, that's probably a gay couple. But you know, back in the day, I didn't see that at all because it was completely covered up. People had to pretend they're straight, they're close friends, or you know, whatever. You know, there was kind of like this gimmick in society, and that kind of still resides there. And then you know, I lived in San Francisco, which is the most openly gay probably city in the world, so I've lived the extremes of both ends of that candle. And also I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, so same time frame as Elton, but he's like probably 20 years older than me, right? So yeah, it's just you get that feel of making people a little bit uncomfortable that haven't really been exposed to it all, like people in the middle of America, they haven't really been exposed to it. They have a little bit now that you've had some gay TV shows, so they kind of slowly change the public perception, and now there's like gay rights and gay marriage, and you know, Elton lived all of this, so it's really interesting because in his early career, you know, he has a girlfriend, he doesn't even know if he's straight or anything, which is crazy. Same with Freddie Mercury, right, when he did the Queen's version. And then he figures, oh, maybe I'm bisexual, maybe I'm not. In the Queen's movie, it's kind of like he doesn't know if he's bisexual or gay, and then later he finds out he's gay. But in this version, it's kind of like he immediately breaks up with his girlfriend, so he knows he's gay, but then he has to pretend. So he has like a living girlfriend that's the pretend girlfriend. And then later he actually marries a woman, which is crazy because he's like, by then he already knows he was gay, but he's like, I'm gonna get married anyway and I'll be happy because my mom told me to. And so this is interesting because, you know, I kind of went through it at my childhood as well. Not directly, but my mom, one of my uncles was gay, and my mom stopped talking to him because he's gay. And you're like, dude, it's your brother. What the hell does his sex life have to do with your being your brother? It's like, it has nothing to do with anything. I mean, she's mentally disturbed in other ways, so that kind of, you know, not an excuse, but if you're mentally, then, you know, that's going to be a minor issue, but not for, you know, my uncle. I mean, it must have been terrible. Have your own sister ostracize you over your sex life. Like, has nothing to do with anything. Like if it's your girlfriend and you get dumped and your lover turns out to be gay, yeah, that's very heartbreaking. So that person could be like pissed off, you know, but I don't know. It's just, you know, people are confused when they're younger as far as, you know, society doesn't make it easy for gay people. Nowadays it's better, but it's still like that kind of like, because it's such a small percentage, maybe 5% of the population is gay versus the rest are mostly straight. It really makes it hard for them to grow up. They have to kind of pretend they don't know what they are, and so it's very difficult when you come of age. You know, even for straight guys, you know, it's hard as coming of age. You know, just being a normal teenage, not a normal teenager, but just being a teenager in itself, besides adding that factor on top of it. So it's really interesting. You see the transition in society from the 70s, 80s, and then finally Elton John kind of officially comes out gay, and it's like, wow, man, you had to take 30 years to come out gay, you know, and it's because it's like you're afraid you might lose record sales or the public's not gonna like you and they're gonna start gay bashing you. So it's really interesting. And you see that also when I grew up, you know, I didn't know Queen, he was gay at all. I didn't know Elton John was gay. I didn't even know Boy George was gay, which is the most openly gay guy ever in the 80s. Like, we had this debate when we were like 14, like, is he gay or is he pretending to be this way? We had no idea. I mean, maybe he was playing with that a little bit, but, you know, like, my wife's like, dude, it was obvious he was gay. But I was living in the suburbs of Chicago, and it was like, you know, we're totally like sheltered life. Like, no one knew, like, this square presentation of this Puritan version of reality that's filtered through America. You know, it's like, oh my God. So yeah, and you still have those issues today. I mean, you have, like, you go to crazy parts of Middle East, and I think it was in Dubai, they originally were going to stone gay people. So it's, you know, you still have some really backwards areas of the world like this. So it's really interesting, you know, as a gay guy coming out now, you'd still be able to do it, but then it's like, you kind of push that down so you can have more record sales, more popularity, because if you come out early in your career, then maybe you only get like the gay crowd and you never break through to main society. And you kind of want to break through as an artist. You don't want to have your sex life dominate your record sales, but at the same time you want to be true to yourself. So it's, you know, they really get this well, I think, in that film. They also did a little bit, you know, on the Queen version, I think they did a good job here. I think they do a better job here. I think it's just because he lived longer, so you can kind of cover more of those topics as, you know, society has changed a lot. Like, now he has his own kid. They don't show in the movie, but I think people kind of know a little bit about that. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting portrayal of Elton, and yeah, it kind of comes up right to this nice transition of where he goes to AA and then he becomes sober, so they don't cover the rest of his life. But I mean, at that point, you've covered a lot of territory. So I think they did a pretty good job. They had a nice character arc through the film. You know, maybe they could have covered later when he adopts a kid, but he was pretty old when he adopts a kid, so it's just, I don't know how they would have worked that in there. It might have made people that aren't as comfortable with that maybe uncomfortable, so he kind of nips it in the bud, so it just gets up to like, he's gay but doesn't admit that, you know, the rest. So that's probably right where you'd want to end the film, like right when he hits AA. I think that's a good ending. So overall, I recommend the film. It's pretty fun. It's a little goofy with the musical element. It's like some parts work and then some parts don't exactly work for me. I think it's an interesting way to get more in depth into the music. So that was kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if they should have shot it more like they shot Queen, where it's like the story and then you have a couple concerts in the story, and like, you know, they said it separately, right? I think you see this a little bit too, like in the Doors movie that I grew up with. That's another excellent movie. I remember the controversy of that was the guy that plays it, Val Kilmer, he plays Jim Morrison, and he refused to drop acid. He just like hung around people that dropped acid and asked him what it was like, and you're like, dude, you only have to drop once, maybe twice to kind of get the feel for it, or maybe once to get the feel for it, and then you know how to pretend it. And you're like, I mean, I get that he doesn't want to celebrate drug usage, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, dude, it's acid, man. I don't know. And the fact that acid kind of leads to curing depression sometimes if you do it enough, which is kind of a new finding. But yeah, obviously acid can be really bad. You have bad trips, everyone knows that. So I can understand Val Kilmer not wanting to celebrate it. And also in the 80s, there was much more of a raging crack epidemic at that time. I mean, now we're in the opiate epidemic, so maybe it's just always a drug epidemic, right? But yeah, it's interesting how sometimes the actor influences how the person's played. Like, he's playing Jim Morrison, you know, on acid and dying and everything. You're like, but anyway, I mean, I like this film with Elton John. I think it was really good. I'll give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe to my channel, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.